All right. Hi, everyone. This is Jeremy Schiefling with Break Into Tech. Thank you so much, Cora, for the opportunity to speak with you all today. And I want to let you know that, like many MBAs, I started my career far from Silicon Valley. Not London, where you guys are, Toronto, but Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, because that's where I began my career as a kindergarten teacher. But as much as I loved kids, I realized that my true passion was introducing them to all my nerdy hobbies, namely technology. And while I was teaching my students to record music and make these cool PowerPoint animations, I began to dream about working for a tech company myself someday, making those same products, designing them myself. The only problem was I thought I didn't belong. I thought tech jobs were only for techies, especially because I kept seeing headlines like these. And you know the ones I'm talking about. Basically, learn to code or else. And as a result, my liberal arts diploma became my secret shame. But here's the thing. Tech actually has a dirty little secret all its own. And it's not just that regular folks like you and me can actually get tech jobs. It's that regular folks actually have the majority of tech jobs. From sales and marketing, to strategy and business development, from finance and research to HR and accounting, there are hundreds of thousands more non-coders in tech than even programmers. And that's because for every single technical job created, 4 non-technical ones spring right up. After all, even the hottest coder can't do everything themselves. Instead, they need someone to manage their code, to market it, to protect it. And so there are literally tens of thousands of liberal arts majors like myself in tech today. And I'm one of them, having gone from Bed-Stuy to Apple, LinkedIn, and startups. And now having founded my own startup, Break Into Tech, to help anyone get into this space regardless of background, I want to show you guys exactly how to do it too, starting with the first step, which is finding the right role. Now, I know it's tempting to start by thinking about companies. After all, we all know these sexy tech firms. Some of us have even wasted $12 to watch movies about interning at them. But ultimately, that's a trap. Because in order to succeed, you've got to step out of your own shoes and start thinking like this guy. Because he's a tech recruiter, the very person who holds your fate in his hands. And so his perspective is obviously critical. Then, once you look at things from his perspective, start to ask yourself whether this sounds like something that he'd say. This is going to be a tough day. I really need to find someone who's excited about Google. Exactly. Tech recruiters already know everyone wants to work for their companies. So instead, they're 100% focused on finding someone who can actually do the job. Which means that you can avoid this trap by focusing not so much on companies, but on roles. In other words, what specific job can you do? And how can you help the recruiter find the right person to get his own job done? But before we go any further, let me draw an important distinction between roles and titles. Because titles on a job description can ultimately lead you astray. For instance, here are the random nonprofit titles I had before I broke into tech. And then here are the ones I wanted. And at first glance, it seemed like I was totally unqualified until I peeled back the arbitrary titles and I looked at the real roles underneath. Specifically, I mapped out everything I had actually done. And then when I mapped out what I needed to do, I realized there was tons of overlap. For example, as a teacher, I was the world's foremost expert on my students. Just like a tech marketer has to be the master of their own audience, I did that for my class every single day. And just like a marketer needs to measure their impact, their ROI, I was doing the same thing every week in my classroom. Now, to help you develop your own map from where you've been to where you want to go, let me give you a quick crash course on 12 mostly non-technical tech roles. And to do so, let me use the example of the Apple car. So as you may have heard, Apple is supposedly working on a new car to rival Tesla. And as a former Apple employee, I can neither confirm nor deny those rumors. But whether it's true or not, it's such a massive project that it involves just about every role in the tech galaxy. Because first of all, before Apple invests a cent in this project, they're going to have their business operations team crunch the numbers to figure out whether it actually makes sense. Is there a big enough market? Is the market growing fast enough? what's the potential ROI if Apple makes an investment here? And only after the business operations team crunches those numbers does the HR team get involved with starting to hire. But because the space is moving so fast, Apple has no time to train a giant team of 1,000 or 10,000 people on how to build a car. Instead, they're going to go to places like LinkedIn and have their recruiters poach away talent from existing companies, from Tesla, from General Motors, from all over. But even that's too slow. So now they have their corp dev or corporate development team come in and snap up a full startup full of automotive engineers. So they're not just hiring one guy, they're hiring 100 in one fell swoop. Now that the team is starting to come together, the question is, what are they going to build? How are they going to stand out in the marketplace? And that starts with the research function, because you're going to have quantitative researchers doing market research, surveys, and measuring the demographics of the audience. Who are the people who are going to buy this thing? Where do they live? How do they think? And then the qualitative side, the user experience researchers, figuring out through focus groups and interviews what people really want in a car. What are their pain points with existing options? And what would make them wild with joy? And once those insights are under their belts, now the PMs go to work. This is that sexy role of the product manager who takes all those insights and all that talent and starts to lay out a plan of a beautiful new product, a vision for a new electric car. And they take that vision and they convert it into specs. And all right, things are ready to get going. Except that the product manager themselves can't build this thing. They need help with that. And that's what I call on their peers, the project managers. These are the folks who take that beautiful vision and they break it down into the itty bitty steps that are ultimately delegated to engineers, designers, and other cross-functional partners. They're the ones who are going to basically hold stand-ups with the team every week and every day to make sure that this project is on progress and on time. And if they play that card really well, then the operations folks are well equipped to start actually building this thing out. Because as the designs come together, Apple needs the capacity to actually build this out and a supply chain to bring every part together into an awesome new product. And that's what the ops folks do. Now, as the actual product comes together, there's only one missing piece of the equation, because the supply is there, but where is the demand? And that's where the marketers come in, because they're the ones who inform the marketplace about the sexy new product. You can just imagine the video with Johnny Ive rolling up his shirt sleeves and talking about the sexy new aluminum in Apple's car and how much you're going to love to drive this vehicle. And ultimately, all of that is in the effort to drive demand, to stir up the marketplace into a frenzy, so they must have this product. Only problem is, people are used to buying cars at dealerships. They want to touch them, they want to feel them, they want to drive those cars before they buy. And Apple has exactly 0 dealerships. But business development, also known as BD, can solve that problem with a strategic partnership. So maybe they say, we've got these guys out there in the field called car rental places. Take Hertz, for example. Now, Hertz has tons and tons of real-world locations where people can drive cars, but they are sincerely lacking in sex appeal. So what if we propose a deal where in exchange for getting an exclusive first year of access to the Apple car before Avis or any of their competitors, Hertz also allows any user to test drive an Apple car at one of their 4,000 locations around the world, and that way we both solve each other's problems. We had that perfect synergy between our two organizations. And that's an example of a business development deal. The same kind of hand-holding is also true for sales, because even if an individual person might buy that car after one test drive, a guy who's buying cars for a whole organization, say a fleet of taxis, maybe 100 or more cars, is not just going to sign on the dotted line after one quick test drive. Instead, they want to be wined and dined. They want to have their hands held. And that's where the sales professional comes in, going out into the field to overcome any objections and getting their signature. And so now the cars are being sold, everyone's really happy, but to make sure they're still happy months later, that's where the customer success team comes in. So customer success is all about this idea that the experience doesn't end at the point of sale. Instead, it requires a concerted effort long after the sale, where the company checks in with the customer to make sure they're satisfied. So maybe it starts in this case with a team of white-gloved valets driving these Apple cars right into their brand new driveways. Maybe it's people following up 6 months later to offer a free tune-up or a free oil change. Whatever it takes, Apple wants to make sure people love these experiences, so they tell all their friends and they drive more repeat sales. And then finally, just like this project started with a spreadsheet, it ends with a spreadsheet, because the finance and the accounting teams now crunch the numbers at the end of the quarter, give those results to the CEO, Tim Cook, who then shares them with Wall Street and hopefully has a big smile on his face. And so that's the product life cycle. And as you can see, tech launches are this huge team effort. But the most important question is, where do you fit into that life cycle? Where are you going to fit in the future? And I would argue that it all depends on the roles that you've held in the past. So first of all, start by thinking about your past work. See if you can place yourself on a spectrum from super analytical at the top all the way to super interpersonal at the bottom. So for example, the former, the analytical side, might include things like serving as a management consultant or a data analyst. And then the latter, the interpersonal, might include things like leading a talent team or building a sales force. Now, once you have a sense of where you fall on that spectrum, line up that experience with the relevant tech roles. Because as you saw in my own weird example, there's actually a really nice connection between pretty much any experience out there that you've had and a cool tech role that's being hired for right now. So I just want to let you guys know, you can feel free to grab this cheat sheet at my website, which is breakinto.tech, in this case /free, to grab this cheat sheet. In addition to the cheat sheet, you'll also get a complete guide to every single one of these roles, from BizOps all the way to BizDev. And it'll tell you exactly what they do all day, how they're hired for, and what it's like to be in those roles. Okay, so once you found your ideal role, now finally we can talk companies. And as I mentioned, it's easy to get caught up in tech siren song. Just like the sirens who lured Odysseus dangerously close to the rocks, tech beckons to us all with all these sexy perks. Ping pong tables on every floor, on-site bars, even slides and ball pits. Tech can basically feel like summer camp for adults. But let me be clear. Here's what tech is really like. That's right. Cubes, conference rooms, meetings, basically Dilbert land. And these photos are actually from Google, believe it or not. This is not Oracle. This is not Cisco. This is the coolest company of them all. So bottom line, don't be fooled by superficial things. Instead, do what Odysseus did. Bind yourself to the mast, that core thing that will truly determine your satisfaction within a tech company. And in my experience, that's culture. Because focusing on culture won't just help you get a job, it'll actually make you happier. And here's why. So back when I was considering my Apple job, I was 100% focused on how sexy their products were. But unfortunately, I never once stopped to think about the fact that Apple is basically my cultural kryptonite, for lack of a better term. Because as you know, I'm this kindergarten teacher guy, the one who wants to bring people together and help them learn from each other. And Apple, by necessity, just can't be like that. Its launches are too rare, too valuable, too secretive to have a super transparent and collaborative culture. And so ultimately, surprise, surprise, I was pretty miserable there. Now, LinkedIn, on the other hand, seemed really lame on a surface level. It's that site that spams you with all those emails. Like, what's the point? But on the inside, its culture was actually perfect for me. It was super collaborative, it was super transparent, and so I loved my time there. Now, here's the trick. If you can't judge a book by its cover, as was the case with Apple and LinkedIn for me, how do you find the right cultural fit for you? To start, I'd recommend by focusing on two of the most important proxies for culture. Specifically, how big is the company and what's the work-life balance like? Because even if it's hard to gauge a company's true feel standing on the outside, those two factors tend to be super visible, it's easy to figure out, and also very reliable. Because as you'll see on pretty much every single company's Glassdoor page, those two factors impact whether people love or hate their companies. In fact, these foundational elements are so important, I've actually gone ahead and mapped out a bunch of companies against them just for you. So on this graph right here, I've plotted the company size on the x-axis in terms of employees, and on the y-axis, I plotted work-life balance, but taking all the comments about that kind of characteristic from Glassdoor, and then I devised a ratio of positive to negative. In other words, the companies on the upper half of this chart have more positive mentions of work-life balance than negative, and the companies on the lower half have more negative than positive. Now, as you can probably guess, these two factors are generally inversely correlated, and they involve some pretty significant trade-offs. Because let's be real, in exchange for working at a large company with great work-life balance, you tend to suffer through more bureaucracy. And in exchange for working at a small company with great growth opportunities, you tend to give up work-life balance in the exchange. But notice, however, there's definitely not a perfect correlation. Because LinkedIn, at fewer than 10,000 employees, actually offers better balance than Amazon, a company with more than 15 times that number. And though Apple and Microsoft are roughly the same size, they actually have mirror image work-life balance ratios. Now, to explain why this might be, let's look at the 3 A's, as I call them, that shape an organization's culture. And those are age, audience, and adversaries. And that way, even if your dream company is not on my chart, you can still use those factors as a rule of thumb to assess just about any firm. And we'll go ahead and start with age. Now, in general, there are 3 distinct tech eras to focus on, beginning with pre-millennials, because these are the companies that were founded before the dot-com meltdown of 2000. So that means everyone from IBM at the turn of the 20th century all the way to eBay at the very end of that century. And they tend to have the best work-life balance because the average employee is a little older, work hours tend to be more relaxed, more flexible. For example, at Cisco, telecommuting isn't just offered, it's actually expected. It's part of the DNA. And in exchange, these companies tend to move a little bit slower and have fewer growth opportunities than their younger peers. But here's an important note. This is not always true, as you're about to see with Apple and Amazon. So that's one side of the age spectrum. On the other end is Gen Z. And you'll find that companies founded after the Great Recession of 2008 tend toward the opposite extremes of their pre-millennial peers. They're way more likely to be located in cities than suburban office parks. They're staffed by young go-getters who embody that work hard, play hard ethos. And as a result, employees tend to burn the midnight oil and complain of having no life outside of work. But don't feel too sorry for them, because in exchange, they have the huge upside of the next Google or the next Facebook, and unlimited cool projects and growth potential that goes along with that. So that's Gen Z. Now let's look at the group in the middle, which are the millennials. Now these firms were founded between the dot-com bust and the financial meltdown, so about 2000 to 2008. And so their cultures tend to lie in between their older and younger peers. So from Google to Facebook, they're definitely not tiny startups anymore, but they're also not dinosaurs. And the result is that these companies tend to have better work-life balance than startups, but also more stress than their older counterparts. So as you can see, age is clearly a major factor, but so is audience. And specifically, when you think about that, ask yourself, does a company get most of its revenue from selling to consumers or to other businesses? And in this case, we'll start with B2C. So consumer-oriented brands like Apple and Airbnb tend to put a big premium on design and user experience. After all, they're going to have millions of eyeballs scrutinizing their products every single day. And as such, their cultures can be crazily perfectionist. Every little detail gets aggressively debated. On the other hand, though, it's also really easy to drink the Kool-Aid in these cultures because everyone's a consumer themselves. And so you're often building products that you'd actually want to use. So that's B2C. On the other hand, let's look at B2B. Now, enterprise-oriented brands like Cisco and Microsoft face a very different set of market realities. That's because corporate purchase trends are typically measured in years and not the months that define consumer technology. For example, Friendster was hot one day in consumer tech and then dead the next, whereas IBM, this B2B giant, has been around for a century. So B2B firms definitely enjoy the stability that come with long-term enterprise contracts, and that steadiness definitely filters down to their employees. In addition, one other positive benefit is there's sometimes less competition for roles at B2B firms because even though they're incredibly profitable, they can seem less sexy on the outside than their B2C peers, as in my LinkedIn and Apple example. And by the way, I know it might seem weird to see LinkedIn and Google in this grouping, but they actually make the vast majority of their revenue from selling services like ads and recruiting tools to other companies, which means that in a sense, you're not really a user of those products. You and your data are the product. So in any case, that's how audience matters. Now let's talk about adversaries, starting with firms that enjoy what I would call a near monopoly. Now, tech firms with a virtual monopoly over the industries are basically sitting pretty. Think Google and search, Microsoft and desktop OS, LinkedIn and recruiting. Basically, even if they stop developing their core businesses at this very moment and their entire offices went on vacation for the next 5 years, they would still pump out billions of dollars a year in revenue without batting an eye. And that's because it would take tremendous amounts of time and capital for someone to both replicate their offerings and change the entire world's minds. I mean, who at this point is about to spend billions of dollars to recreate LinkedIn's database of the world's entire talent pool? And we all know that Bing has tried to unseat Google, but even with billions of dollars in advertising and technology, they only have about 20% of the market. And so the result is that these ATM-like businesses pump out so much cash that companies can afford to both pamper their employees with free sushi and massages, and also explore crazy new ideas like Google's self-driving car or Facebook's internet-powered or satellite-powered internet service. On the flip side, though, these companies can sometimes feel less focused on their counterparts in more competitive markets, which leads to this feeling of bureaucracy and a lack of innovation. So let's contrast these firms with companies that are on the flip side engaged in more fierce competition. Because it turns out that some of the biggest, most successful tech companies are actually in extremely competitive industries. Think Apple playing a constant game of one-upmanship with Samsung. Every year brings a new phone and a new lawsuit. Or Amazon competing ruthlessly on price. Or even Uber and Airbnb pouring millions into a lobbying battle against the entrenched industries they're trying to unseat. And because the bar is constantly being raised in these industries, employees work these long, cutthroat hours just to stay one step ahead of the competition. And the perfect example of that is that famous New York Times article on Amazon from last summer, which basically said, hey, it doesn't only suck to be a warehouse worker for Amazon, even their highly paid white-collar workers go through a lot of stress and craziness too. Now, on the flip side, just to be clear, even though employees in these industries are often really stressed, they often say it was a rewarding experience because they learned more in a year than in 5 years at a cushier environment. So in any case, that's the inside scoop on what these tech companies are really like. But again, the question remains, how do you find the right one for you? In order to find your place in this crazy world, I would recommend completing the same exercise that I did for the companies, but this time for yourself. And here's how. So first, I'd encourage you to reflect back on your own work experiences to determine which organization fit you best. Specifically, ask yourself, when were you the most excited to get out of bed every morning, get down to work? And once you've got a past job in mind, try to focus on the context that surrounded you. Maybe you were on a tiny team burning the midnight oil against the corporate Goliath. Or maybe you had awesome work-life balance and you could actually spend time with your friends and family. Or maybe the environment even changed every day and you loved it. Whatever the case, take that insight, take that understanding, and plot it onto the same chart. Because in my case, as a former teacher, that meant that I craved small teams and I loved having balance in my life. And so if I had actually taken the trouble to do this exercise back when I was in B school, I would have known right away that LinkedIn was a way better fit than Apple, and I could have saved myself a lot of agony. So to help you do exactly that, I've actually got a free book that takes you behind the scenes of 18 of the hottest firms. You can grab that book for free at breakinto.tech/free. Just remember, no matter what you discover, no matter what you find out there, no matter how sexy these tech firms seem, there is no such thing at the end of the day as the perfect company. Instead, there are just cultures that are better or worse for you. Okay, so one last step to cover. While I do that, I would encourage you to start chatting in your questions if you haven't done so already. You can use that Q&A function in the Google Hangout to send in those questions. And in the meantime, let's move to step 3, how to apply the right way. So as we've already discussed, tech recruiters matter. But how do they actually think? Do they spend their days searching for incriminating Facebook material? Are they out to get us? What's their deal? To find out, let's take a look at a day in their life. And the first thing to know about tech recruiters is that they're totally overwhelmed. Because believe it or not, we actually receive 264 applications for every job at LinkedIn on average. And the vast majority of those applications, I hate to say, they kind of sucked. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about because this is the kind of stuff that I sent out when I was in business school and I certainly learned about. And that was things like a very generic resume that I used for every single job, cover letters that began, dear sir, madam, blah, 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 which, might have been okay in other industries, who knows? But in this crazy tech world where culture matters, like I was just talking about, those kinds of letters basically came off as cultural poison, saying, I don't get you, you don't get me, we don't belong together. And so ultimately, because of all these problems, tech recruiters hate passively waiting around for applications to come in. And instead, they want to use a couple of different shortcuts to ultimately find the right person themselves, as opposed to being stuck with that giant stack of applications. And the great thing is, and this is really awesome now, by helping your recruiter leverage these shortcuts, you can actually help them help you. Now, the first main shortcut is LinkedIn. Because instead of suffering through every sorry application that washes up on their shores, tech recruiters now have the ability to handpick the very best talent from all around the world. And what you're seeing right now is actually the $10,000 a year LinkedIn recruiter platform that you never see as an end user, but that every single tech recruiter I've ever met lives and dies by. They always say, if you took away all my tools, all my contacts, all my Rolodexes, but just left me this, I could still do my job. Because it basically gives them access to all 400 million members on LinkedIn all around the world. Question for you then is, in that sea of talent, how do you make sure that they find you? If someone searches for product manager and gets almost 400,000 results, how do you become one of the top 10 results that appears on the first page? To answer that, let's look at what recruiters actually do with their own profiles. Because after all, when in Rome, do as the recruiters do. So firstly, just like the recruiters, you have to make your profile easy to discover. With so many potential competitors on the site, you really have to work hard to stand out. And there are 2 steps to do that. Number 1 is keywords are absolutely critical in the headline, the summary, and the experience sections. Because just like Google's SEO algorithm gives more weight to things that appear in the H1 tag, LinkedIn's SEO algorithm does the same for things that appear in the headline, in the summary, and the experience. So make sure your keywords are there, not just once, but multiple times. And number 2, LinkedIn's search algorithm also weights your position by how closely connected you are to the recruiter. So a bigger network tends to be better. I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to have all these weird people on my network. I want to keep it small and intimate. Problem is, that loses the power of weak ties. That sociological research that we all know, it says the person who's going to help you get a job isn't your best friend or your family member because you're part of the same social circles. Instead, it's that person who's more distantly connected who has access to other social circles you don't even know about. And so I would try to get as many people as possible into your network so you have a better chance of having that weak tie connecting you back to the recruiter and their search. Now, even if you appear at the top of the results, how do you make sure a recruiter is going to choose you for outreach? Well, the trick is that you want to make your profile easy to pick. And that means being approachable, having a smiling headshot, having a summary with personality. If you're going to have this giant pool of candidates, you're not going to pick someone who looks dour or looks like they're not going to be a fit for your industry. You want someone who's fun, who's engaging, fits into that tech culture we were talking about. And you can do that visually here. The other thing you want to do is you want to be super clear about what you bring to the table. Don't say some nonsense thing like, I'm a tech guru or I'm a engineering ninja or whatever. Tell them exactly what you can do and what role you can fill. And the best way to do that is put it right in your headline. Now, the end result is that if you play this game really well, if you follow the steps I laid out for you here, not only will recruiters find you, but you'll have access to these incredible never listed opportunities that recruiters don't post on Monster anymore. Instead, they just search for because they don't want to wait around for those crappy applications to come in. They want to control the flow of talent. So definitely make sure that you get your profile out there. And I found that when I did the same thing, I got crazy results. Because here's the embarrassing thing. Even though I worked for LinkedIn for 3 years, it wasn't until 2 years into the job that I actually said, wait a second, the emperor has no clothes. I'm going around the country and around the world evangelizing for LinkedIn, and yet my own profile stinks. And so finally in 2014, I did a total makeover. All those things we talked about. I focused on my passion for educational technology. I backed it up with the right keywords and experiences. I got a new photo taken. And the result was that basically overnight, I went from 0 opportunities after 7 years to 10 opportunities in the next few months. And that, my friends, is the proof in the pudding. So that is shortcut number 1. Now, the second shortcut that tech recruiters take is referrals. And we all know that every company says they value referrals. But the thing is, tech companies uniquely love them because A, they have so many more applications to weed through, and B, as we discussed, culture is so critical. So employee referrals basically become an easy way to replicate that culture. And as such, at LinkedIn, if I want to guarantee someone an interview, all I had to do was drop their name into our internal referral system. And the best part was, if they got hired, I'd get a bonus of $10,000 just because referrals were that valued. You know, there's even a story of one Google engineer, and it might be a little apocryphal, but bear with me, who basically tripled his already generous salary by doing nothing but meeting with new people for lunch every day and then immediately referring them. And so that very much is the power of referrals. Now, of course, that's all well and good if you know someone already, but what if you don't? Well, no worries. There are 2 super easy routes that, even though they're readily available for you, are not well known. So first of all, LinkedIn has a secret site that I actually worked on that makes it incredibly simple to find alumni on the inside. So basically you go to linkedin.com/alumni, that's the secret. And you'll find this special site that shows you, for both your business school degree, your undergraduate degree, all these alumni working on all these cool jobs. In my case, having gone to Ross, I was blown away to find out that this random Midwestern school has 230 alums at Amazon, 167 at Google, and even 17 at Uber. Okay, so that's if those companies are pretty well known, you're definitely gonna have alumni there. But what if your target is an even smaller company? You know, like one founded last year, or that's still in a garage. In that case, just check out the firm's company page. And all you have to do to find that is a web search for LinkedIn plus the company's name. And I actually recommend doing this on Google, not LinkedIn, because I find that Google's search engine is better at searching LinkedIn than our own. So anyway, regardless, even at companies with just a few hundred employees, you're likely going to find on the company page that you have a couple of second-degree connections, which means you can just ask a friend to make an introduction to the person they know there, and away you go. And either approach you take, referrals really do work. You know, for example, I wasted years and years trying to apply to Google, getting no response. Until one day, I just randomly reached out to an alum, and then later that afternoon, here's what I found in my inbox. All from one dinky email. Years and years down the drain, getting nowhere by myself, when I could have just reached out for help, and that referral would have opened the door. So that's referrals. Now, the third key shortcut for tech recruiters is keywords. And again, facing a giant pile of applications, tech recruiters do not have the luxury of reading every word. So instead, they turn into what I call talent terminators, because they take your full application and then quickly scan it for just the most important keywords. For instance, do you have keywords that suggest you can do the actual job? Do you also have keywords that demonstrate fluency with tech? And at the end of the day, do you seem like someone they'd actually want to work with? But the thing is, even as talent terminators scanning through this application, recruiters still don't have X-ray vision. Because if they did, here's what they would have seen with my resume. You know that techie bullet about doing product development? Well, I reframed that from the nonprofit speak that I normally used, drawing on the specific keywords that I found on the LinkedIn profiles of people I admired. And that bullet with all those critical marketing skills, I figured out which keywords from the job description I had actually done, and then I pumped up a really bare bones bullet. Again, just mining these keywords, plugging them straight into my stories. And then finally, that cool story about being super scrappy, I took a totally mundane point and I fleshed it out with the challenge that I was up against. I made it come alive. And that's because I knew that recruiters had exactly 0 seconds to translate all my weirdo experience into their own language. So instead, I used the keywords that are hardwired into their brains and their job descriptions, and I became my own best Rosetta Stone. So keywords are shortcut number 3. And then the fourth and final shortcut is, believe it or not, romance. Because as much as I like to joke about tech recruiters as talent terminators, they typically only get into this job because they love working with people. So imagine how depressing it is to get application after application like this one. So safe, so conservative, so boring, but no pulse and absolutely no soul. And now, contrast that typical approach with this one. Because this is the opening to the actual cover letter that I sent to Apple. And as you can see, I deviated from the typical script. I spoke directly to the recruiter as a person, not a robot. And I didn't try to hide my background as a weakness. Instead, I embraced it as a strength. And I basically said, my implication was, this letter, it's only for you and for your eyes. I couldn't just copy and paste any other company's name in. It wouldn't have worked. And in other words, I would argue that this is not just a cover letter, it's actually a love letter. Because just like a love letter, it's personal, it's descriptive, it's potentially even seductive. And in my case, it worked. So while my crush might have been this giant corporation with a market cap over 700 billion, the person reading this letter was just that, a person. And so when she had to pick someone out of that giant stack of applications, who do you think she picked? And that's why romance, even in the land of tech dweebs, is the ultimate shortcut. Okay, so speaking of shortcuts, let me give you a quick recap of everything we've covered today. And in the meantime, start chatting your questions in. And while you do that, I'm going to walk through the steps one more time. So step 1, if you want to break into tech, you've got to start by finding the right role. That means focusing on what you actually did in your past jobs, not just some random titles you picked up along the way. And then once you do that, line up your experience with what tech companies actually need. The next step is to pick the right companies. And you can do that by keeping your eye on their real cultures, not their ping pong tables, not their ball pits. And then matching that real culture with the very best environments that you've experienced in your past work. And then finally, step 3, you can ace your application by focusing on the shortcuts that recruiters use to get through those giant stacks of resumes, namely an awesome LinkedIn profile, powerful referrals, the exact right keywords, and yes, even a little bit of romance. And to help you break into tech fast, I'm actually giving away 3 books that I mentioned that walk you through all the different tech roles, the different companies, and the hiring process in minute detail. And you can grab those for free at breakintotech/free along with today's presentation. Now though, I'm going to stop this presentation and take some questions. So again, use the Q&A app to blast those in. All right. So let's see here if anyone has blasted any questions in. I don't see any questions yet. If you guys have questions, please send them in. Just going to check my email real quick to see if Gaurav has submitted any. All right, so I will stay in the line for 1 more minute here, answer any questions you have, and then we'll call it a day. And again, the Q&A app on the left-hand side is your way to ask questions. All right, looks like there are no questions right now, so I will call it a day. Thank you all for taking the time to join the presentation. Here's wishing you a terrific rest of the semester. Good luck with midterms and final exams. And if you ever have any questions about breaking into tech, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, my website is breakinto.tech, and you can always reach me at jeremy@breakinto.tech. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks Gaurav for setting this up. And here's wishing you all happy hunting on your search for the way to break into tech. Bye all.